They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to sell them off. I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and.
On October 30th, 2012, I was riding the bus home from school. I checked my phone and saw the news that Disney had just acquired Lucasfilm and will be making more Star Wars movies, starting with Episode 7. I was overjoyed, so excited at the prospect of what we could get. But what I got was a life-changing experience that irreparably altered the way I consume media forever. In this video series, I'll take you on a journey. From the development of The Force Awakens to the aftermath of The Rise of Skywalker, and of course, all the real-life drama in between. I'm Sam Carrico, and thanks so much for joining me as I explain why I hate my favorite franchise, A Star Wars Story.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
George Lucas's last act before he sold the studio was to put Kathleen Kennedy in charge of it. Kennedy had worked with Lucas for over 30 years, going back to Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. She hired Toy Story 3 screenwriter Michael Arndt to pen a draft for Episode 7, and Star Trek Into Darkness director J.J. Abrams to helm the project. It soon became clear that the new team at Lucasfilm had no interest in adapting the story drafts that George had written for the sequels, so his, quote, creative consultant position was short-lived.
But that's okay, right? I mean, George wrote the prequels, and we all hated those. Surely a fresh perspective will bring better movies, right?
Kennedy and Abrams brought in Lawrence Kasdan, co-writer of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, to rewrite Michael Arndt's Episode 7 draft with JJ. It was only a few months later that Lucasfilm stated they were discarding the plethora of books, comics, and video game stories known as the Expanded Universe. Personally, I took this as a good thing. I understand you don't want to be bogged down by someone else's stories, but seeing this move in tandem with the return of Kasdan, I'm sensing some mixed messaging coming from leadership. This is something that will plague the entire trilogy. In November 2014, we got a teaser trailer for the newly titled The Force Awakens. Starting with an ominous voice stating, "There has been an awakening," we see a black, maskless stormtrooper on a desert planet, followed by shots of more stormtroopers preparing for a raid, a scavenger on a speeder, a new droid, rebels and X-Wings, a hooded Sith figure with a sweet crossguard lightsaber, and finally, the Millennium Falcon being chased by TIE fighters. It was only 88 seconds long, but I loved each solitary second. Yes, it was nearly all familiar imagery, but the nostalgia button in my brain had been pushed. I was suddenly reminded of what it was like to be a kid and watch these movies with all the unbridled joy in the world. This was followed up in April 2015. The first Star Wars Celebration event, hosted by Disney Lucasfilm, climaxed with the full-length trailer for The Force Awakens. I still remember exactly where I was. I saw the new trailer on my phone in the cafeteria at school and immediately hopped up and ran back to the classroom to play it on the biggest screen I could find.
A teacher actually stopped me to ask why I was running, and I simply responded, "New Star Wars trailer," and then he started running too.
This trailer starts with the wreckage of a Star Destroyer on a familiar-looking desert planet. We see a speeder racing along the wreckage as narration from Luke Skywalker begins. "The Force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. My sister has it. You have that power too." We see a title card that says, "This Christmas," and it all feels so inviting. Like your old friend is asking you over for a drink to catch up. We get glimpses of new characters and settings, then the trailer culminates with Han Solo saying to his best friend, "Chewie, we're home," before the title card plays. Damn, now that's a trailer. Even now I can't believe that I like a piece of marketing so much. The hype was unimaginable, so you can bet I bought tickets for me, my father, and grandfather, 3 generations of Star Wars fans, to see Episode 7 in theaters on opening day.
It doesn't matter if it's good as long as it makes money. So because The Force Awakens made a lot of money, I can't be. It's not ergo. It's good.
We begin with a glorious opening crawl. The very first line is, "Luke Skywalker has vanished." What? Why's my guy gone? They were winning when we last saw them. This is followed up with, "The sinister First Order has risen from the ashes of the Empire." Excuse me? How did that happen? That would have been really cool to see. Does this mean that we lost the New Republic? Oh wait, no, because then we see that there is a resistance with the support of the Republic. What is going on? If the Republic is the central government in the galaxy, then why is their military force called the Resistance? What are they resisting, themselves? If the First Order has risen from the ashes of the Empire 30 years ago, why haven't we dealt with that yet?
Order! We shall have order!
We meet Poe Dameron, a Resistance pilot receiving the map to Luke Skywalker. This will begin to make things right, the old man says to Poe. In a meta sense, I'm sure this is JJ's way of saying, don't worry guys, this is different from the prequels, but that only works if the trilogy actually makes things right rather than fucks them up even more. We'll see. Poe is captured by the First Order, led by the villainous Kylo Ren, a hooded Vader-like figure with a sick theme song, a sweet crossguard lightsaber, and the ability to stop blaster bolts in mid-air. There's actually a good bit of comedy that works here when Poe is confronted. Who talks first? You talk first? I feel like later movies learned all the wrong lessons from this scene. Throughout the battle, we see a stormtrooper visibly distraught at the deaths of his colleagues and also unwilling to take a life of his own. We learn that this is FN-2187, played by John Boyega. It's sad because these first few scenes feel like his best scenes in the trilogy. A stormtrooper having doubts about the cause.
This is a rescue. I'm helping you escape.
He shows so much promise as a character here at the beginning. We see a quick shot of Kylo's shuttle approaching his Star Destroyer, and I'm wondering how the hell is the First Order so well equipped? It would have been killer to see the villains portrayed as a rogue, guerrilla-style force in a kind of role reversal from the original trilogy. Of course, that would be different, something I'm realizing this movie has very little interest in doing. A good example of this is Jakku, the next planet we visit. It's basically Tatooine, but the movie gaslights us into treating it entirely different. Here's where we meet Rey, played by Daisy Ridley. Another good intro. I like taking the time to see her daily routine as a scavenger. She has a great theme song too, one of John Williams' best scores for this movie. Seeing the wreckage of the Star Destroyers scattered along the desert creates a great sense of the time that's passed, something the movie seems to do very rarely. We even get a neat practical effect when Rey is making her dinner. This movie made a big effort to use more in-camera tricks than the prequels, and I appreciate it, especially since this effort goes away by the time we reach the Disney Plus shows like Obi-Wan. Rey finds Poe's droid, BB-8, on Jakku. She asks where he's from, and he presumably says classified in his cute little robot voice. Rey replies, "Me too, big secret. This is part of JJ's mystery box." She tells BB-8 that she's waiting for her family, so I'm immediately wondering who her parents could be. Why did they leave her there? I hope the answer is satisfying. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren is interrogating Poe and introduces a new Force ability to my knowledge. He just Force mind reads Poe. I'm like, wow, this guy's super powerful. Will he ever use that ability again? FN-2187 helps Poe escape in a scene that's a good mix of fun and funny. There's a really sweet moment when FN tells Poe that he doesn't have a name outside of his number designation. Poe says, "I'm not calling you that. How about Finn?" And the look on John Boyega's face is great. Like he's proud to have an identity outside of this war machine, but also kind of excited to make a friend. Wholesome stuff. They crash land on Jakku of all places, and I'm sorry, there's no way that Poe survived this crash. I mean, look at this thing. I know they rewrote the script so that Oscar Isaac's character survives, but at least redo the CGI on the TIE fighter so it makes sense. Finn wanders for what feels like ages without water until he reaches town. He sees Rey getting harassed, so he goes to help, and I can't blame the guy. Daisy Ridley is cute as hell, but she's clearly holding her own, and before you can say Mary Sue, I think it makes sense that someone who grew up as an orphan scavenger on a desert planet would know a thing or two about hand-to-hand combat. Rey is established as a huge fan of the Resistance, so when Finn lies and says he's a Resistance fighter and not a stormtrooper,
I don't like the Resistance.
She is super excited. But when he tells her that BB-8 has a map to Luke Skywalker, she says she thought he was a myth. Okay, I'm not sure how these two things can work in tandem. Especially since we see later that she's well aware of Han Solo, you know, Luke's best friend. Finn, Rey, and BB-8 get chased by TIE fighters and run to grab a ship. I really like the reveal of the Millennium Falcon here.
The garbage will do!
Dare I say it subverts our expectations while keeping with the original trilogy. Remember when Luke calls it a hunk of junk in A New Hope? With Finn on the guns and Rey in the cockpit, we see them each whispering to themselves, I can do this, and that's endearing. Almost as if seeing characters doubt themselves and then overcome obstacles is more interesting instead of being perfect from the get-go. They're great character moments and world building too. Kylo Ren is informed that the droid escaped with Finn and he throws a huge tantrum. I mean, there's your classic villain freakout, and then there's what Kylo Ren does. While it does seem funny and played for laughs in the movie, it works for the character, especially with all the pressure he must feel from both Snoke and his own personal vendetta against Luke. He asks if there's anything else, and is informed that Finn and the droid escaped with a girl, to which he replies, "What girl? Wow, they're really building her up. I can't wait for the payoff." Next, we get the scene. The scenes us fans were waiting for. After some light humor with Finn convincing BB-8 to help him lie to Rey, the three are captured by an ominous freighter. After the Falcon is brought in by the tractor beam, they are boarded by none other than Han Solo and Chewbacca. Chewie, we're home. I don't care how on the nose the line may be, I lost my mind when I saw this in theaters, and it still brings a smile to my face on every rewatch, but then I remember what's to come. Rey and Finn are both impressed upon meeting Han Solo. Han Solo, the Rebellion General? No, the smuggler. Wait a minute. Isn't she obsessed with the Rebellion? If she's such a super fan, wouldn't she know Han Solo as a Rebellion General rather than as a smuggler? Whatever. Before I can comprehend it too much, the worst sequence in this movie begins. The tentacle monsters just suck. I don't know how else to put it. The CGI looks so fake and rubbery that it's off-putting in a movie that otherwise tries so much to use practical effects as much as they can. It feels like they just needed to add an action scene to meet a quota. The only thing redeemable here, outside of getting to see more of the classic smuggler Han Solo trying to outsmart the other criminals, is seeing the evolution of Finn and Rey working as a team. I genuinely buy that the connection is building as they go through more adventures together. Back with the First Order now, General Hux and Kylo Ren are meeting with the hologram of Supreme Leader Snoke. Depicted in this film as being several stories tall for some reason, he's basically Palpatine, but betterer. Snoke warns that if Luke Skywalker is found, the Jedi will return. He tells Kylo Ren that the droid carrying the map to Skywalker is on the Millennium Falcon with Han Solo, who is Kylo's father. This is setting up a really interesting conflict and basically the inverse of the Luke-Vader dynamic. Will Kylo be redeemed? Will Han have to defeat his own son? Meanwhile, Rey is able to bypass the compressor that Unkar Plot had installed on the Falcon. This is something that Han Solo was not able to do on a ship that he knew like the back of his hand. It's starting to feel like we're hyping up our new characters to such an extent that we're bringing down existing ones. But that's okay, I mean, how bad can it get? After BB-8 shows Han the incomplete map to Luke, Han gives us our first glimpse at what's happened to Luke between movies. After an apprentice destroyed his new generation of Jedi, Luke went searching for the first Jedi temple, then disappeared. Rey acts surprised to hear the Jedi were real. I know a lot of people were annoyed by this, but the prequels created the exact same problem for the original trilogy, so I'll let it slide here.
It's all a lot of simple tricks and nonsense.
They reach their destination. Upon arriving, Rey remarks, "I didn't know there was this much green in the entire galaxy," and I like the look that Harrison Ford gives here. You can see how sad he thinks it is that someone could have been so deprived of the adventure they seek. I'll say it, Rey should have been Han's daughter. Their dynamic is one of the best aspects of this movie. I really like the scene where he offers her a job on the Falcon. It seems so genuine, or at least as genuine as the gruff Han Solo can be. So they're on this planet to see Maz Kanata to get on a clean ship. Han says it was easy for him to find the Falcon, so the First Order isn't far behind. So are they running to the entrance? Asking around for Maz Kanata so they can see her as soon as possible? Nah, they're just walking.
Han Solo!
Oh boy. Hey, Maz.
Hey guys, the First Order's on the way. Can we pick up the pace? We cut back to Kylo, who is talking to the mask of his dead grandfather, Darth Vader. He says he can feel the call to the light. I imagine it's more intense now that his dad is back in the picture. It's a little over the top, but I do enjoy seeing Kylo's inner conflict manifested. He says at one point that he intends to finish what Vader started, and I'm not sure what he means by that. Is he talking about building a Death Star? Just managing the Empire? Or taking over the entire galaxy? I have no idea. Maz tells our heroes they'll need to fight the First Order, but Finn insists they run. He confesses his stormtrooper origin to Rey. He tells her that he was taken from a family he'll never know, highlighting a huge parallel in their upbringings. This feels like it's setting up a love story, or just beginning the process of turning Finn into a simp. We'll get there. After Finn leaves, Rey is distracted by archive sound effects. She has a vision of a nightmare, or a glimpse of the future or something, and then Maz Kanata tells her what she's known inside all along. Whoever left her on Jakku isn't coming back. Daisy Ridley's performance is great here, even though the CGI on Maz Kanata looks like crap. Rey discovers Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, which Maz says is calling to her. Why? Don't worry about it. Despite Maz's plea to take the lightsaber, Rey runs away, just like Finn did. Let's talk about Starkiller Base. So it's an entire planet. The First Order has hollowed out its core and built a supercannon on it that uses the power of the sun to destroy multiple planets at a time. Sounds cool, except it makes no sense. The Death Star was a base, but also functioned as a giant ship. It was able to move from planet to planet, go in and out of hyperspace, and travel. Starkiller Base is a planet. It has to stay in the same place to be able to sustain life. As in, the lives of the First Order officers stationed on board. Also, why the hell would you make it powered by the sun? What happens when you destroy the nearest suns? You'll die, and you won't be able to move your station to another sun because it's a planet. This is just so clearly Disney trying to have a bigger, cooler Death Star without realizing how impractical it is in-universe and how lame it is in a meta sense. One of my complaints about Return of the Jedi is that a second Death Star feels lazy, never mind a third one. Anyway, this is where we see General Hux give a classic villain speech about his new weapon's power. Domhnall Gleeson is giving it his all here, and it feels so deliberately reminiscent of old Nazi speeches in a way that's a little unsettling. It's a fun villain performance, but it's immediately undermined by the silly design of the weapon's blast. It starts as one beam, then splits off into several beams, basically the opposite of the Death Star. Do you get it? This makes no sense, and it's hard for me to take the destruction seriously because of it. Not to mention, everyone killed in these blasts are nobodies. They have no immediate impact on the story or our heroes. At least Leia had a family on Alderaan. I guess this is meant to be the First Order wiping out the Republic, but that should have been an Episode 8 cliffhanger, or at the beginning of Episode 9. When you do it halfway through Episode 7, you start to get into the law of diminishing returns. As the First Order arrives at Maz Kanata's cantina, Maz gives Luke's lightsaber to Han, Chewie, and Finn, who has decided not to run after all. "Where did you get that?" Han asks. "A good question," replies Maz. "For another time." Another time? Oh, they must be setting up some payoff later, or they're just lazily brushing it aside. I hope it's not the latter. Maz encourages Finn to use the lightsaber to fight off the First Order, which brings us to one of the most unintentionally funny scenes in the movie. Traitor! I love this guy. Why is he so committed to the First Order? Why does he have such a personal animosity towards Finn? They probably should have added some more weight to this confrontation, but I love how random it feels. Just as our heroes are captured, Poe arrives with the Resistance in X-Wings to save the day. I've already pointed out how Poe should be 100% dead, gone, and buried, but I like Oscar Isaac, so I'll let it slide. Yes! The Resistance theme is amazing too, probably my most memorable track from the sequels. Poe's return may be too little too late though, because Rey has been taken by Kylo Ren. Not only does Kylo force mind read her, but he also just puts her to sleep using the Force. That's a super powerful ability that I would be using all the time in combat. Surely he won't just forget about it. There are a couple interesting notes about this sequence. I like the look that Rey has on her face when she shoots a stormtrooper. She actually looks repulsed that she's killed a man. I wish the movies had kept this weight instead of reverting back to picking off stormtroopers like they're nothing. Daisy Ridley's acting is also on point when she's being chased by Kylo Ren. She looks just so helpless as this imposing figure is charging toward her. It really helps build up Kylo as a threat. The First Order leaves with Rey, which really upsets Finn, who yells, "Rey!" Ugh, yeah. That stuff only gets worse from here. After the battle, Leia arrives with the Resistance forces, and we see her reunion with Han. I'm not sure I get the reasoning behind having them break up between movies. As Star Wars fans, I wanted to see these characters pick up where they left off. I understand it's been 30 years, but if Han and Leia are going to break up, I just feel like that's an arc worth showing us instead of doing it off screen just so you can reset Han back to his factory settings in your New Hope remake. Speaking of A New Hope, do you remember Yavin 4? I don't think it's meant to be the same planet, but having the Resistance base look like Yavin 4 feels so uninspired, as if it's cheap nostalgia bait. Almost like it is. Finn is reunited with Poe, and we get almost what feels like sexual tension between them. Keep it, it suits you. I know I'm not the only one who saw Poe bite his lip there. This shouldn't have to be said, but I'd have no problem with them becoming boyfriends. I almost welcome it, just because it would be a nice change of pace from the previous movies.
I love you.
I know.
And the chemistry between John Boyega and Oscar Isaac is actually better than Boyega's chemistry with any of the women he gets paired with in this trilogy. So Rey is on Starkiller Base with Kylo Ren. She's able to goad him into taking his mask off, revealing that he looks like plain old Adam Driver. I think that's a cool move. He's not scarred like Vader, he's just using the mask for intimidation.
Take that ridiculous thing off.
He tries to read her mind again, but apparently it's a two-way street because she sees that he's afraid he'll never be like Darth Vader. Kylo's visibly shaken by this. He was able to get the location of the Resistance base, but not the map to Skywalker. I'm trying to remember if Rey's used any Force powers before this, but I get the idea that Kylo unintentionally awakens the Force in her here. Oh, that's why they call it that! So Rey has a little taste of what she can do. She's like, alright, let's see how far I can get with this. After struggling a bit, she's able to pull off a Jedi mind trick. Okay, she thought Luke Skywalker was a myth before this movie, but was aware of Jedi mind tricks. If I'm steel-manning the movie, I guess she was aware but never thought they were real? With an attack imminent, the Resistance is contemplating how to take out Starkiller Base. They literally show us how big it is in comparison to the Death Star. That's cool and all, but what would be better is if it was functionally different in any way, which it's not. How do we blow it up, Han says. There's always a way to blow it up. Exactly. Been there, done that. Finn lies and says he knows how to disable the weapon, but is secretly just concerned with Rey. Hey, dumbass, we all care about Rey, but that won't matter if we all get blowed up, and you've just made it more likely that happens. We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works. Okay, that's a funny line. Leia tells Han to bring their son home. I get it. He's your kid, and you can still sense light in him. I think it's admirable they still want to redeem him after all he's done. I mean, that's what Luke would do, right? They capture Captain Phasma a little too easily. If you're wondering why I haven't mentioned Phasma until now, it's because she's such an insignificant character that she's barely a footnote. Seriously, they marketed the hell out of this character, and I probably won't mention her again after this paragraph for another couple hours. Anyway, Finn gets Phasma to take down the shields on Starkiller Base. This scene could have been a nice conclusion to Finn's arc in the movie, but they care more about playing it for jokes. I'm in charge, Phasma. The Resistance forces begin their version of the trench run, and I feel nothing. There's not really any tension here. Do we even know how to destroy the base? The movie doesn't care, it focuses on the drama inside the base more. Speaking of which, Kylo Ren is confronted by Han. Kylo takes his mask off, and they have a great scene. Adam Driver is a fantastic actor, and this was an early indication of that. Side note, this scene could have been a nice reveal of Kylo's face and lineage, but I also get revealing it earlier in the movie. After the tumultuous conversation, Kylo stabs and kills his father. For me, this guy's done. There's no redeeming Ben Solo for me after this, because he killed one of my childhood heroes. I don't care what the sequels say. Kylo follows Finn and Rey out to the forest. He knocks Rey out and takes on Finn in a brief lightsaber duel. Remember, until this moment, all the marketing had featured these scenes with Finn holding the lightsaber, so I expected this fight and was waiting for this to happen. I like the added touch of Kylo calling Finn a traitor for leaving the First Order. If you wanted to read way into this dynamic, you could also infer that Kylo hates Finn because he had the strength to get away, while Kylo can't. Regardless, Finn gets sliced and is out of the fight, so get ready for the single best moment in the entire sequel trilogy. Luke's lightsaber is on the ground. Our heroes appear to be defeated. Kylo reaches out and tries to pull the saber toward him with the Force. He struggles at first, but then it comes flying. It flies right past him and is caught by Rey. She sparks up the lightsaber, and the look on Daisy Ridley's face is perfect. She's super unsure of herself, like she's thinking, am I really doing this? Then she gets into attack position as if, I guess I'm really doing this. It's perfect. I wouldn't trade this moment for anything. She's able to defeat Kylo right as the Resistance destroys the weapon. The planet splits apart, and I'm not gonna lie, it looks so comical. Like the writers were like, crap, we still have 2 more movies. So they just threw in this contrived nonsense. Hux and Kylo escape to Hux's ship, while Rey, Finn, and Chewie escape on the Falcon. That was lucky. We see Leia reacting to Han's death. I would have liked more, but I understand that Carrie Fisher wasn't the best actress at this point in her career, so perhaps they had to work around it. R2-D2, who has been in low power mode this whole time, wakes up and reveals the final piece in the map to Luke Skywalker. Rey and Chewie fly off to find him, and the movie ends right as they meet. It was a literal cliffhanger, did you get that? And that's The Force Awakens. A little too reminiscent of A New Hope, but I think it was a good introduction to these new characters. Aside from a couple small things, it didn't really damage the existing characters. Harrison Ford had wanted Han Solo to die for a while. They played it safe, but now they can really shake things up with the sequels. I hope they're good, but first, we gotta talk about a spinoff.
The reactor module, that's the key. One blast to any part of it will destroy the entire station.
I think our process of making it probably was a little bit like the characters in the film. Like, they had plan A, and then all this crazy stuff happens. And as long as you can sacrifice yourself to achieve the goal.
Rogue One: A Star Wars Story is a prequel to A New Hope, about a group of rebels that steal the plans for the Death Star and make it possible for Luke to destroy the superweapon in the original movie. The number one criticism I hear going into this movie is something along the lines of, does this movie need to exist? Can't the hole in the Death Star just exist without an explanation? And the answer to that is, sure, it can, but it doesn't have to. No movie needs to exist. We didn't need to see the origin of Vito Corleone, but should we have stopped with Godfather 1? People who like to nitpick these movies, like me, have always wondered how such a gaping design flaw could happen. As long as there's a cool idea to explain it, make the movie.
Okay? We good? Great. Before we talk about the movie, though, we gotta talk about that first teaser trailer.
It seems to showcase a darker film than the one we got. The editing is superb. The ominous tone is amped up when the Death Star sirens chime in with the score. We hear narration from Forrest Whitaker pondering what will happen when our heroes are caught and broken, implying we may see someone defect to the Empire, as we see a final shot of our protagonist in an Imperial uniform. That's a pretty neat conflict they set up there. It seems pretty intentional, so surely they won't just discard that idea. The first trailer came out in April 2016. In June of 2016, 6 months before release, the production underwent several weeks of reshoots. Although these reshoots were supposedly planned from the beginning, they heavily impacted the post-production process. Tony Gilroy had to be brought in to direct these scenes, taking over for original director Gareth Edwards. Composer Alexander Desplat also had to be replaced with Michael Giacchino in September after the reshoots pushed everything back, and the fact that Giacchino churned the soundtrack out in like 3 months is remarkable. But enough about making the movie. What actually happened in it? We begin with the classic "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away," but no opening crawl? I have very mixed feelings about this. I get wanting to distinguish yourself from the mainline saga movies, but the fact that this movie is a weird in-between spin-off almost calls for an opening crawl more. As an Imperial shuttle makes its way to our first planet, I'm immediately struck by the cinematography. It's already more impressive visually than anything in Force Awakens. Right from this prologue and onward, everything looks so real and lived in. They already used a lot of practical sets in Force Awakens, but it looks like they stepped it up for Rogue One, and I appreciate that. It helps this movie slot right in seamlessly before A New Hope. Imperial officers are still making their way to the Urso farm. I have no idea why they parked the shuttle so far away, but this gives us a chance to check out the Empire's new theme for the movie. They could have easily just reused the Imperial March and it would have made perfect sense, but Michael Giacchino went out of his way to give us a new theme and it slaps. All of the music for this movie is this good. It's unique too. Anytime I hear a theme or melody from this movie, I immediately know that it's a Rogue One song. As much as I love John Williams, I don't know if I could say that about the sequels. So like I said, we don't get an opening crawl, but this prologue is basically a flashback. We meet a young Jyn Erso, her parents, Galen and Lyra, and Galen's Imperial boss, Orson Krennic. Krennic has got the coolest bodyguards, the Death Troopers. Ever since I was a kid, I always thought the Stormtroopers would look way more intimidating if they had a black color palette. Anyway, Krennic is after Galen because he and Galen have been developing the Death Star together until Galen defected. Here we see the Death Troopers kill Lyra and kidnap Galen while Jyn goes on the run. She's eventually found by Forrest Whitaker, and this brings us to the jarringly upbeat title card. I get that that's the theme song for the movie, but it just feels weird after all the death and kidnapping we went through. This also feels very abrupt as the title card takes us straight from young Jyn to adult Jyn. I almost would have preferred an opening title sequence similar to X-Men Origins Wolverine that takes me through Jyn's adolescence in a very succinct way. Let's talk about Cassian Andor though. He is a die-hard member of the Rebellion who will do anything for the cause. When we meet him, he's talking to an informant and then kills him when things go south and it looks like that informant will be caught by the Empire. This level of moral ambiguity is something that other Star Wars movies have tried before, but I don't think any of them accomplish it as well as Rogue One does here. Jyn Erso gets rescued by the rebels, and this is where the plot really ramps up. She is taken to the rebel base, and I don't want to hear any of that "do you remember Yavin 4" bullshit because The Last Jedi literally rips off Empire and Return of the Jedi for no reason. Say what you want, but this movie, in this period in the Star Wars timeline, requires Yavin 4. What you can complain about, though, is how disjointed Jyn's interrogation scene is. It feels like a lot of stuff has either been cut or retooled here. I don't get a strong sense of how Jyn came across the rebels' radar, what she's been up to over the past however many years, or why she's so immediately willing to help the cause. There's a lot of telling and not a lot of showing, but I guess it's serviceable to get the plot going. So they're sent to find and meet up with Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker. What's interesting to me is this idea of a rebel versus an extremist that gets introduced here. The rebellion doesn't push back on the idea that they have the same goals as Saw, they just disagree with his tactics. I can't help but wonder how the original script may have fleshed out this idea more and even attempted to draw a parallel with the real world. This is where we meet the droid K2SO, and I don't have a lot to say other than I love him. I think he's funny. It's a lot easier to make a cute little droid like BB-8 that doesn't have to talk, but having a sassy droid can be challenging, as we see in later movies. I think a lot of it comes down to Alan Tudyk's performance. Your mileage may vary, but K2SO really works for me. Another thing that works, I'm almost sorry to say it, is CGI Tarkin. Putting aside the ethical issues of digitally recreating Peter Cushing's iconic performance, Tarkin's presence is great for bolstering Director Krennic as a character. I love how he's this disgruntled middle manager type of villain who is doing everything to try to impress his superiors. Right down to the flamboyant outfit with the cape, you get the sense that Krennic is constantly trying to be seen as Tarkin's equal. Tarkin, meanwhile, doesn't need a cape. He just lets his work speak for itself. It says a lot about the two characters and keeps them both from being just bland Imperial officers. Jin and the team make it to Jeddah. Jeddah is a planet with a super cool design that I know nothing about. I'm sure it has a backstory in a book or something, but there's none of that here. It's got these giant Jedi statues that have fallen over and been buried by the sand. I love the look of the Imperial starship hovering over the city, but this sequence on Jeddah also has the worst scene in the entire movie. Riz Ahmed plays Bodhi Rook. I feel like he's criminally underutilized for being such a great actor. Bodhi is a cargo pilot that allies himself with Galen and then defects from the Empire before the movie starts. This would have been really cool to see. When we meet Bodhi, he's on Jeddah looking for Saw Gerrera. Saw doesn't trust him, so I don't know how to put this. He subjects Bodhi to some tentacle fetish shit. Yeah, no matter how you slice it, Borgulette sucks. This scene did not need to be in the movie. Saw could have interrogated him, tortured him conventionally off-screen, and then Bodhi could have just met up with the rebels in Saw's prison cell like he does anyway. There's clearly someone at Disney that worked on both Rogue One and Force Awakens that was like, hey, let's keep the tentacle shit in there. So as our heroes are making their way through the occupied town, they find themselves in the middle of a battle between Saw's men and some stormtroopers. This battle is shot well, mostly because of how raw it feels. This is one of the only times in Star Wars that you actually get a snapshot of the casualty of war on everyday civilians. This is also a good chance to show how Jin is genuinely a good person saving people, and they get to show us how Cassian is starting to actually care about Jin's well-being. Character moments, development! The Guardians of the Whills are also introduced in this battle. Like Jeddah, I'm sure there's more to these characters, but they appear very surface level, at least at first, like they're just meant to set up a prequel comic. Chirrut Inway is blind, super devoted to the Force, and uses a stick, while his companion, Baze Malbus, uses a gun and is no longer devoted. Baze gets a little bit of an arc, but overall they're super underdeveloped. Chirrut is also able to defeat stormtroopers with a stick. Don't even get me started on how much this further destroys the idea of stormtroopers ever actually being a threat. So anyway, they're all taken by Saw Gerrera's men to his lair, while the Empire prepares to test the Death Star on the town. Saw shows Jin a hologram that Galen left behind for her. Galen explains his motivations and how he dedicated his life to planting a weakness within the Death Star. Felicity Jones is acting her ass off in this scene. You can just feel the weight that's been put on her shoulders as she falls to her knees when the hologram ends. Somehow this movie is able to make me care about characters I just met, even though I know they probably won't make it out of this movie alive. Just as the hologram ends, the Death Star begins its attack on Jeddah. I challenge you to name an action sequence in any of the other Disney Star Wars films that's exciting as the escape from Jeddah. They have to escape a planet as it's being destroyed by the Death Star. It's just such a fun idea for an action sequence. I can't believe it hadn't been done already. Juxtapose the excitement on the planet with the coldness of the businessmen in suits watching the destruction on a monitor. Krennic doesn't care about how many people just lost their lives on the planet below. He just wants Tarkin to tell the Emperor that he did a good job. In his outburst, when Tarkin takes away control of the project, it's like if Patrick Bateman was a Star Wars character. I'll admit, after the Jeddah sequence, the movie suffers a bit. There's just too much ping-ponging around between planets. Our heroes make their way to the Imperial base where Galen works. Jin tells everybody about the hologram, but Cassian already has orders from the rebels to kill Galen. Meanwhile, Krennic interrogates Galen and his men to find out who the leak is. So many problems here. I'm not even going to go into the giant coincidence that the good guys and the bad guys are here at the same time. I have no idea, though, why Krennic is choosing to do the interrogation outside in the middle of the rain. It's clearly just functionally for the movie so Galen can be easily killed. His death, by the way, happens because of a miscommunication. Cassian makes the choice not to kill Galen, but the rebels send X-Wings to do the hit before Cassian can call it off. They manage to shoot Galen, but completely miss Krennic, Krennic's men, and Krennic's shuttle. Wow, these rebels are precise. Or it's a bad case of plot armor. As silly as Galen's last scene was, we get a pretty compelling exchange between Cassian and Jin. They've both come a long way. Jin has been so used to being selfish, and Cassian has been so used to just following orders, but now they've ended up in the same place, believing in the cause, and willing to do what's right. Next up, we get our first Darth Vader scene. It's mostly fine until Vader says a shitty pun. What I do like is that it shows Krennic's pure brazenness, going over Tarkin's head to talk directly to Vader. When Vader questions his leadership, all Krennic responds with is, "So I'm still in charge?" All this guy cares about is power, but he's clearly outmatched this game. He's becoming desperate, which could be a real problem for our heroes. Speaking of which, our heroes return to Yavin 4, where the rebel leaders initially decide not to help them infiltrate the Imperial base on Scarif. Encouraged by Jin's speech, though, Cassian assembles a small group of rank-and-file rebel soldiers to help them anyway, because it's the right thing to do. Jin tells Cassian, "I'm not used to people sticking around. This may be subjective, but their bond is really well done. I totally buy this change in both their characters." As they head to Scarif in a stolen Imperial transport, Bodhi gives us the title drop. Inside the rebel base, Basil Oregano goes back to Alderaan and makes a reference to Obi-Wan that is totally ruined by the show. I do like that this movie was able to bring back Jimmy Smits and Genevieve O'Reilly from the prequels. For the most part, it doesn't feel like fan service, it just makes sense. Team Rogue One makes it to the Imperial base on Scarif. Jin, Cassian, and K2 infiltrate the inside to get the plans, while the rest of the team create diversions across the island. I like how this sequence finds a way to make everyone on the team essential to the mission. The way Ben Mendelsohn plays it like it's just his worst day at work ever is really funny to me. It's also funny how Tarkin's face almost lights up whenever he's told that Krennic is there on the base, like, "Oh, I've got an idea." The rebel leaders see Rogue One's progress and decide to help after all. Here's where we get a C-3PO R2-D2 cameo that's just pointless. As much as I defend the existence of certain characters in this movie, they really had no point being here. I mean, they should be with Princess Leia on her ship at this point, right? We've reached the climax, and this is a big part of how this movie improves on The Force Awakens. They do not hold back with the awesome space battles. It's front and center, while in Force Awakens, the real action took place inside Starkiller Base. I think they were able to find a good balance here, but the stuff on Scarif is still impressive. I mean, it's hard to beat Imperial walkers on the beach. I just wish we could have seen more of them like we were originally going to before the reshoots. We're barreling towards the end though, and we start getting all sorts of payoffs now. Throughout the film, Jin and K2 have been skeptical of each other. As they reach the room containing the Death Star plans, Jin gives K2 the gun that he's been asking to use this whole time, showing us her newfound trust in him. It's really sweet, especially as he uses that gun to defend himself when stormtroopers surround and kill him. This is where the movie starts to change for me. In that theater in 2016, I had been enjoying the gritty look of the film, the different cinematography, and overall darker tone, but I didn't know if Disney would have the balls to kill off characters we'd just spent an entire film getting to know. But one by one, we see Bodhi get blown up, Chirrut gets shot to death, then Baze also dies. While the character development is pretty anemic, I like the added touch of Baze becoming one with the Force again in his final moments. If you wanted to read into it, you could say this speaks to a larger theme in the film about believing in something, even if we won't get to see the reward of that belief. Cassian and Jin are able to retrieve the plans, but Cassian gets knocked down, so it's up to Jin to climb to the top of the satellite and transmit the plans to the rebel fleet above. It's serviceable, but this film really suffers by what was cut out of it. Those first trailers showed us shots of Jin running on the beach with the plans in hand, trying to escape Imperial walkers. We also saw this badass shot of Jin standing face to face with a TIE fighter right where the transmitter is. None of that is in the final cut though, so this last confrontation just feels neutered. Maybe that's why we shouldn't watch trailers. Cassian defeats Krennic and Jin is able to transmit the plans. The day is saved. Unfortunately though, the Death Star arrives and begins to strike Scarif. A couple things are great about this. I really like that Jin ultimately chooses not to kill Krennic. She's fulfilled her father's legacy by doing good. She's no longer driven by hate. She began this movie lashing out with negativity, but now she's doing something positive. It's a fine arc. It's also perfect that the person who ends up killing Krennic is his boss. The person he spent the entire movie trying to impress. The minute he got the chance, Tarkin threw Krennic under the bus and killed him to cover his tracks. I'll just let that speak for itself. Jin and Cassian make their way to the beach and embrace each other. Just before they die, Cassian says to Jin, "Your father would have been proud of you." It would have been so easy to have them kiss or say they love each other, but I appreciate that it's very platonic. Not every meaningful relationship in your life is romantic. I think their characters suffer a lot from the reshoots, but Jin and Cassian are still great protagonists for this story. They're not Jedi. They're not special. They're just good people who chose to do the right thing. Not only that, but they died for a pretty small victory in the grand scheme of things. But that sacrifice feels so earned. I don't want to jump ahead, but later films could only hope to achieve this. Before we close out, we get our second Darth Vader scene. He just mauls his way through the rebel soldiers like nothing. It basically lives up to the promise of having Darth Vader in a modern Star Wars movie. His power looks unmatched, but it doesn't break the existing rules of the Force like something like the Obi-Wan show does. One ship is able to escape Vader's clutches though, and we see on board Princess Leia, who receives the Death Star plans. When asked what they've been sent, she replies, "Hope." I love it. I'm not going to go into how the world felt politically in late 2016, but for many people, this was the first time they saw the Leia character after Carrie Fisher passed away. Having the character say hope obviously works for the story, but it also serves metatextually, telling the audience that everything's going to be alright.
You may have been able to tell from this that I really like Rogue One. Being the first spin-off from Disney, I think it earns its place in the canon and basically does the opposite of The Force Awakens.
While there, they took something that should have felt different and made it into something we recognized, this movie takes something we recognize and gives us a new, different story that enriches the other movies. It would have been a great sign of what was to come. But what came next changed everything.
I told Brian this, it's no surprise. I said, I just fundamentally disagree with your concept of this character and how you use him. Now, having said that, I'll do everything within my power to realize your vision. Because, it's not my character to decide. It belongs to other people. They just rent it out to me.
This is where it happened. This is the Warren Theater in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. It was here that I got my tickets for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Star Wars Rogue One, and yes, Episode 8, The Last Jedi. I vividly remember sitting down to watch Episode 8 with my family and girlfriend at the time. I was super excited for what was to come. And keep in mind, this was a time where I generally liked most of the movies that I saw that I was looking forward to. If I was anticipating it, I was probably going to like it. But there was just something about The Last Jedi that left a bad taste in my mouth.
Salt.
Before I even made it back to the parking lot. This movie gives us the title crawl back. I'd give it points for that, except the text makes no sense. The First Order reigns. How? I'll admit I wanted a better understanding of the politics of the galaxy after Episode 7, but again, this makes no sense. How is the movie simultaneously right after Episode 7, but somehow enough time has also passed for the First Order, who just lost their superweapon, to take control of the entire galaxy? Whatever. So the Resistance is fleeing their base when the First Order fleet arrives, and I'm immediately struck by how the stakes are all over the place. Poe is able to stall for time by making yo mama jokes that are not funny.
I believe he's tooling with you, sir.
I get what they're trying to do functionally, but this kind of humor just feels too modern for Star Wars. Tarkin would have killed Poe instantly, while Hux just sits there. Don't get me started on Hux, by the way. This movie took a somewhat intimidating fascist-type character and just made him into a joke who's constantly being humiliated. Krennic from Rogue One is such a better middle manager type of villain because the script takes him seriously.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
I mentioned in previous sections that The Force Awakens was a little lacking in the space battle department. This movie tries to make up for that in the same way Rogue One did, but in this opening scene, I honestly can't tell where anything is in proximity to each other.
And I hate to be that guy. I mean, I really, really hate to be that guy. I don't want to be this guy. But how the hell do those bombers work?
The Resistance is trying to take out this giant First Order ship called the Dreadnought, so they send out several slow-moving bombers that release explosives through the bottom, which fall down through space, where there is no gravity. Not only that, but they fall in such a way that would inevitably create a chain reaction that would kill the person inside, which is exactly what happens. The person who died was a brand new character, and the movie goes from Poe joking around to this character dying, then back to Hux being silly within like 3 minutes. So I honestly don't know how invested we're supposed to be emotionally in this sequence. But the silliness doesn't end here. 2 of the mysteries left by the last film are immediately played for laughs. Remember how Finn was nearly killed? Well, any tension there is gone because now he's a joke, slipping around with hoses, spraying water everywhere. But this pales in comparison to how the film handles the cliffhanger ending to the last movie. Rey finds Luke Skywalker and hands him his lightsaber. What will he do with it? The motherfucker just tosses it aside. It feels downright disrespectful, like this film doesn't understand the weight of the previous installments. This is just the beginning of what director Rian Johnson's entire intention behind the movie was. He wants to subvert your expectations. But the main way he seems to accomplish that is just by playing what should be serious scenes for laughs. Yeah, it's not what I expected. I expected tonal consistency.
Ha! He's insane.
This movie doesn't even have the sense to show us Luke reacting to the death of Han Solo, because why would we want to see that? It's like Rian just doesn't understand what Star Wars fans care about. No, let's watch Luke spend his day milking weird aliens instead. Just insulting. I'm glad I came on opening night for this. Luke finally tells Rey that he has no intentions of returning to the fight, that he came to this planet to die, and that it's time for the Jedi to end. I'm not one of those people who thinks this turn for the character is inherently bad. I just think it has to be earned. I hope you'll understand over the course of this section that it's not earned, but first we've got other stuff to discuss. Hey, you guys remember how politics were a really boring part of the prequel trilogy? Well, you know what's even more boring than politics? Fuel problems. Throughout this film, the Rebel fleet are trying to escape the First Order, but they don't have enough space fuel to outrun them, so the two fleets are basically one after the other the entire time. Oh my god, you somehow made a spaceship chase in Star Wars slow and uninteresting. Luckily, the monotony gets broken up when Kylo Ren and some TIE fighters attack the rebels. Kylo has the opportunity to kill his mom and resists, but she still gets fired upon by Kylo's accompanying fighters. I mentioned before that Carrie Fisher unfortunately passed away in 2016, meaning this movie, The Last Jedi, was the last movie that she was able to record material for. I honestly think that having the Leia character die in this movie would have been a powerful way to go, and if done right, it could have honored Fisher's legacy. They chose not to do this, instead having her fly like Mary Poppins through the cold vastness of space and back into the ship. I don't know, there's just something about watching Carrie Fisher literally come back to life that's unsettling to me. And it definitely doesn't help that they killed her off in the very next movie. The person they do kill off in this particular space battle is Admiral Akbar. Yep, fan favorite character from the original trilogy. He's dead now, and it happened off screen. With Leia in some sort of coma, we meet her replacement, Vice Admiral Holdo. She is immediately rude to Poe for no reason, and all of her dialogue towards him reads to me like she's on a power trip and letting her sexism get in the way of doing her job. Don't worry though, we're not done with annoying characters yet. Let's meet Rose Tico. Finn tries to board an escape pod so he can lead Rey away from the doomed rebel fleet when he is stopped by Rose Tico, who thinks he's a deserter.
Routine checks.
By boarding one with a packed bag.
Ugh. Holdo hates Poe because she misunderstands him. Rose hates Finn because she misunderstands him. It's so annoying when conflict is created by characters misunderstanding each other, and by the time you reach the end of the movie, you realize that Finn was right to try to escape. He's basically trying to get off the Titanic, and Holdo is the captain. But now we've made it to Canto Bight, the worst part of this movie and maybe the trilogy. Finn and Rose are sent to this casino planet to find a code breaker where they learn a harsh lesson about arms dealing in the Star Wars universe. I'm gonna say it, George Lucas handled this better in the prequels. The idea that both sides are corruptible is a running theme in that trilogy, and it's actually given a chance to be fleshed out there. Finn and Rose don't find the actual code breaker, but find Benicio del Toro instead, who's giving the worst performance of his career here. We see that Canto Bight is being propped up by slave labor, and our heroes do nothing tangibly to help the poor kids. They just destroy the town they live in, then leave. They do free the horses, though, after which Rose says, now it's worth it. Sorry kids, I guess your freedom just wasn't worth it to our heroes. Let's catch up with Luke and Rey. Luke is convinced by R2-D2 to help train Rey.
It was a cheap move.
Their first lesson is treated like a joke, then we're baited with the idea of Rey turning to the dark side. The tone is all over the place. Rey, meanwhile, is starting to communicate telepathically with Kylo Ren, who hints at a dark history between him and Luke.
Did he tell you what happened?
When asked about it, Luke tells Rey that he sensed the dark side within Ben Solo and tried to confront him, then it went horribly wrong. Rey tells Luke that he didn't fail Kylo, Kylo failed him. Literally no, Kylo did nothing wrong, as we'll find out later. I guess it would make sense for Rey to blame Kylo, though, because she literally watched him kill Han Solo in front of her. If that's the case, why is she so willing to sit around and bond with him telepathically over the campfire? It makes even less sense that she would be convinced to surrender herself to Kylo Ren in hopes of turning him to the light. You just saw him kill Han Solo! That's nothing, though, compared to the character assassination they do to Luke Skywalker here. Just before she leaves the planet, Rey gets Luke to admit the truth.
Briefest moment of pure instinct. I thought I could stop it. Passed like a fleeting shadow, and I was left with shame and with consequence.
Kylo didn't attack Luke. Luke tried to kill his own nephew just because he sensed a spark of the dark side within him. That's right, folks. Just a couple years after he redeemed his father, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker didn't even try to talk to Ben before he went to the nuclear option of killing him in his sleep. I understand wanting to change a character by taking him on an arc, but this is just having him flip on a dime. I'll say it, not my Luke Skywalker. Of course, they gotta throw in the added touch of having Rey defeat Luke in this moment, knocking him to the ground, holding his own lightsaber against him. The disrespect. The defeated shell of a man, Luke Skywalker, goes down to burn the special Jedi tree containing the sacred Jedi texts when he is greeted by Yoda, who, I shit you not, conjures lightning to destroy the tree himself. Awesome, this movie doesn't understand Force ghosts. If they can interact with the living world, then why don't they show up and use their lightning powers in battle? That would be really helpful. But this scene fails on a thematic level too. It's supposed to be all about learning from failure, moving on from the failure of the Jedi. But we see that Rey has taken the Jedi texts. She's literally going to be learning from textbook examples of the Jedi's triumphs. Which is it? Back at the slow-speed chase, oh joy, Holdo is practically asking for a mutiny. She's letting her fleet get obliterated and not telling anyone what the plan is. Poe is completely right to mutiny, and I think the film is at least somewhat aware of this, judging by how many characters he's able to rally against Holdo. It's not until he's stopped by Leia herself that Holdo was able to retake control. Leia and Holdo then joke about how Poe is a good kid, so I have no idea what the lesson of this storyline is supposed to be. And you can't say there's any stakes to this chase, because you've got characters like Rey, Finn, and Rose just ping-ponging all over the place. It gives the feeling that characters can just come and go as the plot allows.
First Order was tracking our big ship. They're not monitoring for the transports.
Speaking of Finn and Rose, they sneak aboard Snoke's ship and immediately get caught. Benicio del Toro's character sells them out. Do you get it, guys? It's about failure.
It's just business.
Finn has a rematch with Captain Phasma. Honestly, I don't remember her having a single scene in this movie outside of this one. They basically put as much effort into this rivalry as they do between BB-8 and the evil BB-8.
Let's go, Chrome Dome.
Finn is able to defeat Phasma, and their escape from Snoke's ship is comical. Using the walker to jump between the wreckage, I'm watching a clown show. Back to Rey though, the idiot turns herself into Kylo, who brings her to Snoke. Snoke tries to get Kylo to kill Rey when BAM! Kylo kills Snoke instead. 3 years of speculation down the drain. Was he Darth Plagueis? Mace Windu? Jar Jar? No, he's dead, and you're dumb for getting invested in him. Your Snoke theory sucks. I don't care how you try to square this circle. The way this trilogy handled Snoke is bad and leads to nothing. They tried to pay it off immediately after by giving us a genuinely good fight scene featuring Rey and Kylo working as a team, but then it gets undone when they have Kylo Ren revert back to his evil self and try to take the lightsaber back from Rey. He's gone through all this development to basically end up at the same place he was in Force Awakens. Rey isn't left undamaged here. Before he factory resets, Kylo Ren tells her that her parents were nobody, dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku desert. I have no idea why this movie is getting so mad at me for actually being invested in the franchise and speculating about things. All this fighting is interrupted by what some people mistakenly call the best part of the movie. The rebels have abandoned ship and the escape pods are being picked off one by one. Holdo uses the last cruiser to hyperspace kamikaze herself into Snoke's ship. It looks beautiful, I'll give it that, but this creates so many problems for the Star Wars universe that the very next episode had to retcon it into being a 1 in a million shot.
We need to put some Holdo maneuvers, do some real damage.
Come on, that move is 1 in a million.
Meaning Holdo made a 1 in a million shot on her first try, or she was genuinely trying to escape.
She's running away.
Something I wouldn't put past that coward.
No, she isn't.
So the remaining rebels make it down to the planet of Crate, and I swear Rogue One is so good that even this movie has to acknowledge Gareth Edwards by giving him a cameo here.
Salt.
Finn and Rose are able to make it inside the base just barely before the doors close. Wow, that's lucky. The First Order lands with a giant laser that will blow open the blast doors, and Finn decides to sacrifice himself, flying his speeder into the machine in an attempt to destroy it. This would be a perfect end to his character arc. He started the previous movie on the run, faked being in the Resistance, tried to flee, but now would die a hero of the rebellion. This awesome ending was absolutely ruined when fucking Rose Tico flies her speeder into Finn's, stopping him and making it about her. She hurts herself in the process, and when Finn asks what she was doing, she's offended by the question.
I saved you. Tell me.
She tells Finn that they win by saving what they love instead of fighting what they hate. What did she think Finn was trying to do? Destroying that cannon would have saved the rebellion. To make matters worse, she closes this all out by kissing Finn without his consent. He's clearly put off by it. Then fading. Rey shows up with the Millennium Falcon and diverts the TIE fighters.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
All fighters!
While Luke Skywalker shows up and takes on Kylo Ren. And Luke's kind of a dick to Kylo for no reason.
He's doing this for a reason. He's stalling so we can escape.
Keep in mind that Luke tried to kill Kylo before he could even do anything evil, so when he acts like he's completely given up on him,
No one's ever really gone.
it's just cold. We eventually find out that this Luke was a hologram and the real Luke dies back on the island after literally doing nothing. Awesome. Great art, guys. I'm so glad they gave us a sequel trilogy so I could see Luke Skywalker be a sad hermit then die doing nothing. Holy shit. The rest of the rebels escape the base while the First Order is distracted. I don't know how this doesn't put them right back in the exact same position they were at the beginning of the movie, but whatever. I guess they can't track the Falcon through hyperspace because of reasons. Leia tells Rey that they have everything they need as we get a wide shot of the remaining rebels, and it's abysmal. Like a couple dozen people. We've lost. There's no other way to put it. Despite this, we get a shot of the slave kid back on Canto Bight looking up to the sky as if he's inspired. I have no idea what about this story would have inspired him. The part where they fucked up and lost, or the part where they fucked up and lost? People say this is meant to imply that now anyone can be a Jedi. It doesn't have to be just a Skywalker. Yeah, duh. The prequels already said that. This movie does the most basic things, but acts incredibly smug while doing so.
The movie business is exactly like professional gambling. Except you hire the gambler. Usually some crazy kid with long hair who's like, I don't get this guy at all. You give him $100 million, and you say, go to the tables and come back with $500 million. That is a risk. Now, the studios are going to go and think of it that way. They say, well, maybe if we told him that he couldn't bet on red, maybe if we told him, because we did market research and we realized that red wasn't, so they tried to minimize their risk. But once you, and of course, you're hiring the kid to take risks, to be creative, to do things that have never been done before, never been tested. You have no idea whether they're going to work or not. That's completely the antithesis of what a big modern corporation is.
This year is the 5th anniversary of Star Wars The Last Jedi, and when asked about it, director Rian Johnson said, quote, I'm even more proud of it 5 years on. When I was up at the bat, I really took a swing at the ball. He went on to say, I think it's impossible for any of us to approach Star Wars without thinking of it as a myth that we were raised on. And how that myth, that story, baked itself into us and affected us. The ultimate intent was not to strip away. The intent was to get to the basic, fundamental power of myth. And ultimately, I hope the film is an affirmation of the power of the myth of Star Wars in our lives. Whatever the fuck that means, you'll get no argument from me that Rian Johnson got to do what he wanted with his Star Wars movies. Of all the films in the Disney era, The Last Jedi may be the most filmmaker-driven, but it serves as a stark reminder that filmmaker-driven doesn't automatically translate to good. To quote a friend of mine, I just fundamentally disagree with your interpretation of these characters. As the movie ended, this marked a turning point for me. I really enjoyed The Force Awakens and Rogue One, but I couldn't bring myself to like The Last Jedi. This was the beginning of the end, the beginning of why I hate my favorite franchise. But we've still got a lot more to discuss. How would I react to this newfound disappointment? And how would Disney react to the reception to The Last Jedi? Well, I hope you'll join me for part 2 of this video essay as we dive into Solo, A Star Wars Story, and Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I'll see you then.
I'm questioning the purpose, and you wouldn't believe what's happening to me. I know I might be wrong. I know I might be wrong.
Fuck! The fuck was that? I didn't even do anything.